Hey everybody, Selwyn here from WynnStrength.com. On this week's training vlog, I'll be doing week 5 of THOR'S Power Program. This is actually the first week of phase 2, so it's pretty exciting stuff. So what's great with day 1 of phase 2 is that I get to go back to a regular squat, which I haven't done in about a month. The first 4 weeks were just straight up SSB squats, week after week. There wasn't a variation of the squat. This was effectively the only squat movement that was prescribed for the first 4 weeks. Again, and this here will be the only squatting movement that will be prescribed over this phase of the template. The squats are looking pretty solid. I think depth is an issue across all these sets, you'll notice. So none of these kind of hitting the great depth that I like to hit normally. I mean, mainly just by like an inch or two at most. We do notice that the back angle doesn't change, so that's nice. There's a lot less, there's a tiny bit of shifting back of the knee. If you notice when I hit the bottom of the squat, and look where the knee starts, that actually wasn't too bad. So the knee shoots back as like an initiation of the movement. You kind of want to try and prevent that by focusing on pushing out with the legs and trying to keep the knee at the same angle for the first part of the movement. It's a lot easier to focus on when the weight isn't as heavy. By doing that, by keeping the knees forward, you actually are able to utilize a bit more quad in the movement. I think that SSB has really driven up my back strength for the most part, so I'm starting to rely a little bit more on that. Whereas the assistance movement has been a lunge, and the weight hasn't been that heavy relative to what I can squat, but the fatigue that sets in after doing heavy squats and trying to lunge is a lot less. So just some footage of me switching out the barbells. I just want to take this time to talk about the setup of the program. The one thing that I think is lacking is the lack of actual squatting movements over the course of the program. So it's very much an upper body focused program, I think. It's really the only leg movements happen on day 1 and day 3 for the squats and the deadlifts. So here we have accessory movement 1 for the day, which is just a reverse lunge with the SSB. This is meant to be a walking lunge, yet as you've probably seen in the weighted carry section of my videos, I don't have a lot of room to do walking anything. So I substituted in the reverse walking lunge, a kind of favorite movement of mine back in the day for lunges. Always making sure to kind of hit the stride length. You don't want to cut the lunge too short, kind of losing some gains there. And then I opted to superset this with the single leg calf raise. Again, this was meant to be a different variation, so the seated calf raise. Obviously, I don't have a seated calf raise machine. I think I could have tried to jerry-rigged something with the barbell resting on my leg while I did that, but this was just an easier way to get that calf work in. Again, I've been trying to really focus on making sure my heel touches the ground on those movements, because it's really easy to cheat those. Now we go on to day 2, vertical pushing and pulling. They changed up the overhead press into a high incline press. So the problem with the calculator, or the problem with me, first week was prescribed at 215 pounds for 4 reps. I tried 225 for 4 reps. I was barely able to hit 215 for 2 reps. So something in the calculator was really far off, or I was just really far weak. So I had to drop it down to 205 in order just to try and get those 4 reps in. And these were a real struggle, because the movement is so awkward for me anyway, because it feels like I can't move my head out of the way, and I'm having to push it a little bit more forward than I'm used to, so the weight just feels like it's in an odd place. And then, I mean, the great thing with the program is we've supersetted them with some chin-ups, which I think is just a great superset option if you wanted to do that. Just thinking of the antagonist-agonist muscle groups, what's pushing you down is now pulling you down, so it feels like you get a good stretch and a good balance there. So I think what would be great is if I was able to move my head out of the way just to get that awkward movement, unless the reason for this is that my arms are forced to be more forward, loading the front of the delt a little bit more than usual, putting some muscle mass there. Whatever the case may be, they were extremely tough and something I haven't done in a while, so I think that really helped build up some anterior deltoid growth. The next exercise we have is a beltless overhead press for I think 8 reps. This had to be subbed in instead of some heavy dumbbell overhead work, since I don't have weights that heavy for the dumbbells. I think it works out just fine because I like to keep the main movement in the schedule as much as possible without having to work on accessory movements. And then the superset for this was some fat grip pendlay rows or some axle barbell pendlay rows. I don't have either of those equipments, so instead of doing that, I wrapped my wrist straps around the barbell and got a somewhat similar fat grip variety there. So I think that was a good substitution. The surprising thing with these is how much your grip relates to how much you can lift. I tried to do the 135 and it felt so awkward in my hand. I couldn't even grip it. I think it just fell out of my hand at one point. So we had to drop this all the way down to 95 pounds in order for me to even get the weight going. It just felt really weird. So now into day 3, deadlifts. It's great because I don't have to do those snatch grip deadlifts anymore. Now we're just doing some 1-inch deficit deadlifts. Just showing some of the warm-up procedures here. All I'm doing is doing a couple of reps, 4 reps sets with weights increasing using the 25s and 45s just to build my way up to the main heavy lift. Really enjoying this because I don't have that wide grip anymore. The movement's feeling a little bit more familiar with the regular grip and the regular stance. Again, the one thing I don't enjoy with this program is a lack of conventional movements. Same with the squatting. I wasn't able to do a regular squat, and then with a deadlift, I haven't done a regular deadlift. There's my cat. Because I'm a firm believer in specificity of muscle development. For the past 3 months, by focusing on squatting, bench pressing, deadlifting, overhead pressing in the regular varieties, I think I've been able to really drive up the skill necessary in order to lift those weights. And the one problem I have with the program is the lack of direct work, and kind of using an accessory lift as a main movement for that day is, I think, the biggest downfall of this. Mainly for the squat and the deadlift. The bench press and the overhead press are there. For the last 4 weeks, or 8 weeks, I guess, I've overhead pressed and bench pressed in the regular variety. The next movement is some weighted carries. I just play this fast because it's kind of boring to watch and it looks funny in double speed. And the final movement for the deadlift day is some Romanian deadlifts. And I like to just go below the knee and focus on keeping that back straight. I'm not really too concerned as to whether or not I use a belt or not. I like to use a belt when my lower back's feeling a bit taxed, especially if there's been some heavy deadlifts prior to this. I don't think it really matters whether you use a belt or not, but I do use some straps so I don't have to rely on that alternating grip. That's the one thing I'm not a big fan of when doing some higher rep deadlift work. Unless grip work is your main goal, I would say just use some straps if grip is a limiting factor with a higher rep, heavy-ish deadlift accessory movement, mainly because you want those shoulders to be somewhat symmetrical for the entire movement. Now we move on to day 4, horizontal push and pulling, so some bench pressing. It's pretty much bench press day. Here we have 257 pounds for 4 sets of 4. Again, the program is great at driving upper body strength, but I don't think it's as great at driving lower body strength, mainly because you're losing out. Well, I mean, for the specific movements of the squat and the deadlift, I think you're missing out on practicing and refining the skill of squatting and deadlifting in their normal or your more preferred choices of the movement. Again, you're doing SSBs, and then for the first 4 weeks, and now for the next 4 weeks you're doing regular squats. But for the deadlifts, it's going to be 8 weeks since I've touched a regular deadlift. And then supersetted with some pull-ups at the grip width that you bench press in, and kind of hone in on that superset. Again, I think pushing and pulling is a great superset movement. The bench press, I've been working on the skill of doing that leg drive. I've read basically you want to try and push your head through the wall. So you're not wanting to push up, you're trying to slide your feet out. It's made that mental cue a lot better, I think. I'm able to understand what leg drive kind of is a bit more. Keeping that arch in place, keeping the body as tight as possible. Now we move on to some accessory movement here with the incline bench press. I got some new used bumper plates, and I think it's funny that this might be 315, but it's actually a lot less than that. Never the case, low incline bench press for a couple of sets of 8. Supersetted with some pendlay rows at 205. Again, sometimes I use the belt, sometimes I don't, just depending on how my lower back's feeling for that day. And as you've heard me say in the past, I'm not too concerned with all the body movement here, because as long as we're getting the weight up, it doesn't matter how you get there, it's just an accessory movement. The low incline bench press, I think, is probably one of my favorite ones. It just feels more natural. It feels a lot more natural than the high incline. Pressing here, I've heard that it doesn't matter what incline level you use necessarily, because I mean, strength is always specific. So if you're just trying to drive general mass in the chest area, you can use kind of whichever angle you want, because there's no direct correlation between what incline you use and your bench press output, I guess. So I like to, each 4 weeks when they do inclines, I like to mix up which level of incline I use. More of just a variety, and just to see which level is more optimal coming from my bodybuilding days. So that wraps it up. Week 5, first week of phase 2 for Thor's Power Program. I'll leave some notes down below like usual to check out the program itself. Check out my blog, WynnStrength.com. There I have a weekly write-up of my training, a bit more frequently than I'm updating this. Is a lot quicker to write that out. Check me out on Instagram too. I'll leave some links there. I usually put daily posts right after I work out for that day, so you can keep track of me there. Hit that like, subscribe, comment if you've used the program before, how you feel about it, or if you're currently using it, any tips, recommendations you might have. And thanks again for spending your time listening to me ramble on about Thor's Power Program. This has been Selwyn from WynnStrength.com.